Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code Slam the Gavel for 10% off your first year of Urgent Assist. And this is available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother narcolepsed passed away 5 months ago. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to the Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system, where he can't speak or understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390, as well as the senator to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I have two guests on. I'm very, very happy to have Tracy Armes on, an advocate, and I also have Alisha Clark back on. She was last on the podcast, season 4, episode 65 and 102. And we're going to talk about hashtag every parent's battle every day, and what is the norm of family court, and why did all of this happen to Catherine Youseff Kassenoff? Why did this have to happen to her? I welcome you both to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me again.
I'm glad to have you both on. You've got a lot of input as far
Yes, let's get right into it.
Definitely. There's been a lot written on Catherine that she also has written herself. She very well documented her journey through this horrific family court experience and being so legally abused, legally tormented to no end.
And that's not just by her ex-husband, that's the ex-husband's firm and the judges and the attorney for the children and the system and the forensic evaluations and money. So it's all that as well. Mm-hmm. From New York State.
Yeah, she wasn't abused, it was the continual abuse. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think it's shedding light on what all of us have to go through of the continuation of abuse. Now it's legally, but you see it well documented of how many judges and the flat out lies of these judges of awarding him residential custody, mm-hmm. or this judge, whatever her name was, I got in trouble for this female judge was saying on Koba, Nancy Quinn Koba, she was like the mother's conduct deliberately, her placement and her interests. Catherine's interests were her interests alone and solely, not her children's, which is despicable. This Koba judge, a magistrate, acted like she lived in the household.
Yeah, or ex parte communications, or these orders that she being removed from her house without even a defense. Judges in New York State can do that. They could just write an order and remove you from your own house with your name on it, like in this case with Catherine. And in my case as well, they can just remove you from the home through these, orders without even defense and put you out on the streets because, you're in this case, your ex has a lot of money and is connected through law firms. So that law firm is going to rush into getting these, orders to get her kicked out of the home. and restraining orders that are supposed to be for very extraneous circumstances, not to kick somebody out of their home through a divorce.
Mhm.
True. And it's almost, and it's sad that it's a manipulation at point blank, and it's allowed, especially legally, and it's done favor for favor or favor because this person is a lawyer, so you know what, or a judge, so based on no evidence. And that's the sad thing. The evidence isn't viewed. Her evidence was never seen, or her many of her motions were just completely thrown out.
And that's something I've experienced in the New York court system as well. I consider myself a pretty good writer, and I have a year of law school behind me. And my motions and my orders, or I'm sorry, my motions for the past 5 years were very well researched, a lot of case law, and if you Google me, you can find it everywhere. And I felt often that the judges, and I even have a couple admissions of guilt from judges, especially from Rivera, that they didn't even read, and Judge Catherine Youseff Kassenoff, they didn't even read, some of this stuff. They're just going in there, shooting by the hip, and you give one judge a dirty look, you get supervised visitation. And that's exactly what happened to me. I gave the judge a quote unquote dirty look. And then I had supervised visitations, on something where I was coming, on a hearing that I was coming in for something, completely different, without trial, without representation. These judges just shoot from the hip, and if they don't like you that day, then you're considered, the loser.
Yeah. And in my experience, Alisha, I think it's, my whole with many judges, they go in there, they've already had their mind made up, they've already been manipulated by my ex-husband, that's a lawyer, that's gone into their chambers before, had privy to access to them. I didn't get that, so I can show pictures of 8x10 of my battered body and my child's battered body, and I can say this guy is someone of the law, he knows the law, he's abused it, and he's asking for residential custody. Your Honor, this is just in spite. There is no ifs, ands, buts. And meanwhile, they're like, okay, awarded temporary custody because you moved 17 miles out of your radius. But Your Honor, I'm showing you 75,000 arrears. This is from the New York State Department. They don't care. They don't want to. They've already made up their mind. They've already been swayed. And that's the problem. That's the problem that Catherine, other people that have unfortunately, someone, an ex-spouse that's abused their status.
And it's a lot of different layers to that too. There's a lot of different factors. It's also a lot of pro se discrimination in the courts perpetrated by the Bar Association. So that lawyer is gonna, represented by who, the defendant or the plaintiff, your oppositional lawyer, that lawyer. And if you're pro se represented, that lawyer's going to show up in the courtroom again. You're not. This judge is probably not going to see you, but they're going to see this high-paid attorney in this high-paying law firm, quite a bit. So they have this, unspoken relationship. The Bar Association supports judges, and they come from the Bar Association, right? The Judge McGinty came from the attorney for the child program in my case. So they're all in protecting each other, and, screw these parents and these rights. Like, yeah, right. We have our own bus to cover with the Bar Association and for the attorney for the child program. So there's a lot of different, I think, factors there.
And there's a lot, at least also in my case, where my ex called out that I was mentally ill, because, we all are, and that I was alienating the kids. And I had never even heard that term before. But here in Catherine's case, she documented back on October 29th of 2022, she said, I will hold the father legally accountable for alienating the girls from me, which is emotionally abusive. And it's child psychological abuse. And these child abusers in black robes need to be held accountable, along with the guardian ad litem, along with these court-appointed psychologists that are perpetuating the parental alienation. And I'm sorry if you can call it junk science, I guess, until you live it, until you have to go through it yourself, then you'll get it. You can call it your big toe if you want, but it does exist. You know, alienation the term exists. So what she went through also was that the judge gave her the final order that she couldn't even see her kids. And apparently the dog was dying and she had wanted to see the dog, and they denied her that as well. And they have no accountability. These judges have no accountability.
Not in
And
New
this-
York.
Right.
I don't know about this, but not in New York, where this case is just a couple of counties away from mine's, kind of the same, you know, higher powers that be. And, you know, there's no judicial accountability in New York, as far as I can see. Show me where there is.
I agree. And this is the problem, Alisha. This is why we have to band together. There has to be cameras in courts. There has to be some accountability. Absolutely. If you were so afraid to the first thing you go into court, this conversation, this hearing will not be recorded. Why? Why? Because are you afraid of somebody knowing the truth of a false ruling, perhaps, or something not being justful, Your Honor? Why? So we need accountability and transparency.
It's all across the board. All across the board. New York State's one of the few states in the country that doesn't allow cameras, you know, in the country. New York State's one of the few states that doesn't allow bonds for judges. So it's from top to bottom, the corruption in New York State, and the transparency, you know, runs really, really deep. There's almost no accountability in New York State for state court actors, including cameras in the courtroom.
Exactly. And I think that if we had it, I think, don't you ladies agree? It'd be a completely different game. It would be fair game. If we had cameras in courts, that we had bonds, they'd have actually fearful.
It would be a start. So
Right.
it would be a start.
I think tamper-proof cameras, because I had interviewed someone where they said, well, they videoed the first hearing that was there, but then when my hearing came up, they turned off all the video and camera.
Wink, wink.
So
And
it's
this,
totally tamper-proof.
absolutely. So
But again, you know, court reporters get paid a lot of money in New York State. You know, Judge McGinty gets paid, I think, over $300,000. The same with the attorney for the child, over $300,000. Forensic evaluators, $10,000, $5,000 to $10,000 a pop. So you know, follow the money. Like even court reporters get paid a lot of money. Like everybody wants to be paid, right? And the retirements, you know, on these judges is astronomical. The amount of, you know, retirement that these judges get. In Judge McGinty's case, he's 64, almost retiring age. If he gets in trouble for ordering, you know, penniless mothers to jail, he doesn't care. He'll just, if he gets in that much trouble, he'll just retire. And he collects a big fat check. He doesn't care. That's what, same with, you know, the attorney for the child and these forensic evaluators. They ever get in trouble, like you can't sue anybody in New York State. The federal courts don't care. So, you know, they're going to do whatever they want. And there's no eyes like cameras in the courtroom to even, you know, hold any type of accountability anywhere on any level.
even if you have a court reporter, something selectively not going to be you can't inaudible. You can't. How many times have any of us encountered that? The most pertinent part of your case or anything, and it's inaudible. So things like that. So you definitely need cameras in courts. Absolutely, that are tamper proof. So.
It's a systematic problem, and you know, it happened to Catherine. and the stress, this legal abuse stress that I'm sure she was endured, and countless other parents, the stress of, all of this, and be like, here's, we're not, these mothers who walk into the courtroom, like me and like Catherine, we're not, most of us are not like Catherine and our lawyers, and even look at how they treat, lawyers, judges and courts in New York State pick winners and losers. And they, God forbid, oh, maybe I made a mistake by giving, maybe that was the wrong ruling, that I gave these kids to this abusive parent. Like, oh no, like we can't do that. So a lot of these parents are walking into these New York State courtrooms and are like, what the hell is going on here? Like, I got to do what and file what and where and who, and and there's no resources. Very much a lack of resources for any type of help to navigate this complex, at the very least, judicial system.
It's true. I was telling Marianne, Alisha, there is a fathers group, and I will get the name. I have a close friend, same thing, a doctor in California, married to a lawyer for a year. She was a lawyer, and she claimed sexual abuse on just an infant, just really warped. Bottom line is, he had all this assistance. He had all the empowerment from a fathers group that are ex-judges, that are presiding judges. So on their time off, they would empower other fathers and say, listen, this is what you should do. These are the motions that you need to file. This is the thing. And that's in California. I think there's a group in Connecticut, a fathers group. You see and this is the thing, these are retired judges and judges that are still presiding, that are doing on their time off, that are assisting other fathers. We don't have anything for mothers. Especially here in New York. We can't depend on one mother's battle. Please give me a break. And they're everywhere. They're throughout the country. So I think if we had a group that we can empower each other, and there has to be at least a couple female or male judges that would say, listen, this is the way to do it. This is the ins and outs. But this is a strong fathers group, and this guy was on Oprah Winfrey's show. That's how powerful these father groups are.
Well, I haven't really experienced the same thing. More the judge who, in my case, was religious discriminatory against me. Her name is Judge Catherine Youseff Kassenoff. Like, she was a woman judge, no children, of course. And she was known to be in a very, she definitely needed like a psych eval. She was known within the lawyers group of that. So, I feel like it's a bigger problem than groups in New York State, because even then, there's very little groups of support in New York. There's a couple Facebook groups, but it's definitely mostly just parents who've gone through the same thing. Like, I've reached out to the ACLU as well, and nothing. Everybody's been crickets. So like, I will create my my own group with other parents across the board that maybe we could support each other in a grassroots way, because organizations are either too busy or don't have the time or the funding or the resources. And again, in New York State, there's almost no resources for parents to navigate through all of this. Like, well, here's our ruling, we're the judge, sit down, shut up, and we need our paycheck. I have 15 minutes to hear your case, thank you, next. It is I believe also playing devil's advocate, that there's so many court cases that are heard. I think I read a statistic just yesterday that lawyers, even though they're systematically the problem, there's just like a huge there's a lack of transparency and there was a lack of help. And, I think these judges and these court systems are overwhelmed by the amount of cases too. A judge sees how many cases and, one day, 15 minutes pop, I gotta go, next case, here's your ruling. I'm not gonna read anything because they probably have like 200 cases that day that they have to, get through, and you got musical chairs going around in these judges' chambers too. So like, it's the whole system is just needs to be reformed top to bottom, and there's got to be more resources to help parents try to like navigate through all of this.
I agree. But I think I've seen, I'm sure as you all have, there's something going on that's not, everybody has a sickens, like just, if you were a judge, you would kind of know who the instigator is and who the good parent is. That's just our human nature. You're going to know who the good guy and bad guy are. To go into court and say like they're overwhelmed or they're really just, I don't know, uneducated. They're not educated in the legal abuse. Please, they're not a judge because they didn't go to law school. They know right from wrong and who the problem person is and not. So there's a reason which I can't grasp of why they are siding with a bad parent or someone that's a pedophile or a sexual abuser or a physical abuser. There is some sick reason right now that's going on that they were allowing children in the custody of a bad parent. What it is, I have no idea. I can't figure it out. I've discussed it with many other people, but there is a reason. You tell me why a child is going to go to a pedophile parent or a physical abuser or whatever else.
Well, I think it's a lot of different things. I don't think it's just like one clear answer there. I think it's lack of transparency. It's a lack of accountability. If they can do whatever they want, then what do they care? Like reviewing the case or any documents. They'll never get in trouble for anything that they do, ever. So, I think that's a problem. I think it's pro se discrimination is part of the problem. I think a lot of these judges are overwhelmed. That's a small part of the problem. I think, I really truly think that judges like Shalakis and McGinty, speaking personally, they need psych evaluations, and it's
Great.
the money too. It's the protection of all this money for the attorney for the child and program and all that money and billions of dollars. It's billions of dollars going through the New York court system every year. And I think that's, if you want to find a root of the problem, it's probably the billions of dollars that go through this system and all these people that are getting paid. They're protecting, themselves and their big fat retirement checks is probably, my answer to that question.
And they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them, of course, absolutely not. So you can hire a $700 an hour attorney. It's still, you're going to have the same results because they're going to have to face that judge again because they hurt his feelings or they ruled it for justice. So absolutely.
And these parents will drain bank accounts and sell houses and all of this stuff to try and have some sort of, fair justice. But it's really about, working the system and then, 10,000 retainers and more retainers and more retainers. Everybody's, and then you're in it's like, oh, there is no actual justice or fairness, in this court system or anything close to it most of the time. So, don't get caught up in the system, don't get it caught in this rat race, because you if you're a decent parent, you're going to get, and I've seen this so many times across the board, not, the most unfair system in New York. You can be ordered to jail without a judge even being voted in that county with no judge, no jury, not a judge that's even voted in the county, no representation, and no jury, and you could be ordered to jail because the
Go figure.
judge has a bad day that day, or you wore a pink sweater, or whatever political affiliation, or you're pro se representative. Like it's so many layers to it.
Or
Yeah.
collusion, where my judge worked in the DA's department for 3 to 4 years with the opposing attorney. And if you say, hey, this is a conflict of interest, we need a new judge, can you recuse yourself? And then he screams at you that he's not going to recuse himself because he knows this case better than anybody else, when this is only like day 2 of the whole case.
Yeah.
How does he know it so well? Yeah.
And that's the thing, giving them the option to recuse himself. There should be someone that oversees and says, yes, no, there's obviously a conflict of interest, so you're off.
And that's a really good point that you're bringing up here right now. Recusals, like the judge in New York State is the only person that can decide if he's in a conflict of interest. That's it. That alone is like a huge problem. Like, no one else can decide. Only the judge gets to decide. Lawyers, like, they're going to retaliate against you if you expose anything of their little, shell game of, whatever transparency or corruption. Like, they're going to go after you, So that's a really good point that you brought up. Like, only in New York State can judges recuse themselves.
Yeah,
that's it. Lawyers too, an attorney for the child. There's no oversight.
None.
With all of that. None.
I don't know. It's beyond broken.
And even in my, with Judge McKinty in my case, I had filed numerous recusal motions, and he decided he wasn't going to recuse himself, and he put it with prejudice, meaning I can't file it again. I do anyway, but right. like I'm here on this podcast talking crap about you, and you're still the judge, and you're not going to retaliate against me. Sure, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll believe that.
Oh,
and it's funny. No, go ahead.
He should just take his toys and go to another sandbox.
Right? Yeah. Isn't it sad? Even me, whether I live in Manhattan or 3 counties away, I know McGinty. I know his horrible reputation. Everybody does. That's despicable. Yeah. So there has to be some accountability when these judges have an atrocious record and a horrible reputation, and all these judicial complaints and filings against them. And it's just like passed, like, no, you know what, we're denying that this judge's ruling or whatever, or we have an ethical issue with this judge. It's disgusting. And it's just,
and you see it all the time in the press too, with the Valva case and now this Catherine case. It's just like there's no accountability in all this forwardness, and shame on the oversight, the CJC and Office of Court Administrations, like all these complaints. I know Judge McGinty has dozens of complaints. Rumors have been 100, but there's no publishment of these complaints. Everything is just, well, we're just gonna keep this quiet and just move this judge to a different county, and hopefully none of these complaints get out, even though the New York Post writes about it, and they're sued federally. So it's a mess.
There has to be some unity, as we were discussing. I was helping a dad, and he told me, he said he even called fathersrights.org and crickets. What? Yeah. So, there's got to be a place a parent can turn to where they're not going to get raked over the coals. They've already been raked over the coals.
Yeah. The question is who and what. You go to Supreme Court, you're going to get the same results from Supreme Court.
Well, it has to start with the grassroots, cameras in the courtroom, judicial reform, laws being passed, media, you know, it's got to be from the top to the bottom to make any type of change here in New York State. And you're fighting, you know, the David and Goliath fight. You're fighting against billions of dollars. And like, I think there's a little bit of burnout because it's only the parents that, you know, try and make these grassroots changes. And, you know, like they get stressed out so much that, you know, they, you know, get cancer possibly, you know, from it. So like, it's such a stressful situation. I think, there's been one statistic like the suicide rates just like skyrocket, you know, because you're getting, you know, children, you know, loving parents getting children ripped away from them because, you know, one judge with no accountability, not even voted in the county, says so. And if you don't like it, he's going to send you to jail, you know, and that's just the reality of the situation. That's very hard, I think, on you know, individuals, because there's no organization to help you. You know, it's going to fall onto the parents, and it's so hard on them. It's hard on me. I'm sure it's hard on everybody, you know, on this podcast, and it's hard on Catherine. And you know, I really sympathize with that.
It is a pain. Yeah, it was. So I moved 17 miles. I wasn't getting child support, to give you an example of having your kids taken away. Always a great mother. 8 years I've supported my children, worked nonstop. I moved, I was paying $2,600 in a 2-bedroom apartment in New York, in Queens. And doing the best I could. And it's a typical New York. You have cockroaches, mice from your neighbors. It's New York. So I moved 17 miles. I couldn't afford anything in Queens, so I had to move further out. Just, it only made sense for my 2 boys. I had two boys. I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old boy. So I moved 17. The only thing I could afford was 17, a little further out. I didn't know I had a mileage cap, first of all, my divorce, when I just innocently. It's the only thing I could afford. Long story short, my ex-abuser, was like, you know what? Him being a lawyer, read through the divorce, all through it again, found a little niche, was like, oh, she moved out of her mileage cap. I had to go to a magistrate in Orange County. And do you know that she didn't want to hear the reason why I moved away? She's like, you moved out of your radius. I'm like, Your Honor, he's 75,000 arrears, and this is the only thing I could afford. These are the living conditions we're in. I'm doing the best I can on my salary alone. I had to literally sign my children away. I had such a blackout that I don't remember signing my children and giving him temporary residential custody. I almost had a nervous breakdown to that point. And then I had to hire an attorney, of course, which did absolutely nothing. And 2 weeks later, when I'm telling this magistrate and showing her that he had a history of violence, and I wasn't getting child support, and showing her big 8x10 arrears, 2 weeks later, my child was thrown across the room like his mother from his father. And there's audio of this, and I document everything and let my viewers know that this is the way family court works. It's not, you think you're naive and going into court and like this is my first time, my divorce is going to be so amicable and we're going to split 50-50 custody with the children. It doesn't work that way, people. It is justice for some, and you are guilty until proven innocent. So you can have a false allegation, a CPS thrown on you that you starve your children or beat your children, whatever, and they are going to believe CPS and the false allegations before they believe you and view your evidence. So this is what we are living and going through unjustly, and not completely unnecessarily. And if you had an actual judicial system that sat and weighed and had jurors and said, like, listen, this, then we'd have accountability. We wouldn't have people taking their lives or having heart attack and health issues and everything else, and nervous breakdowns, and children killing themselves because they're forced to go. I have audio and video of my children saying the cries of that they didn't want to go to their father and their abuser. How would you like to go? Yeah, I mean, this is what's going on. This is the reality of our world nowadays. This is the America, the so-called justice system that we are all having to live in.
There was oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you know, and shame on, you know, again, from the top down, shame on these federal courts that when you sue these judges, like, oh, frivolous, we're just gonna dismiss this, you know, shame on the federal government for not protecting, you know, these citizens, you know, of New York. Shame on the, you know, CJC, shame on the Office of Unified Court System. They all turn a blind eye to it, so they can get away with it. Judge can, you know, get away with it in so many cases, and it's so stressful, you know, on parents. And the suicide, I don't have the exact statistics in front of me, but the suicide rates for these abused parents all across the board are just, you know, double, triple, you know, on the pain that these, you know, judicial systems, New York courts are placing on, you know, mothers like Catherine. And it's only other parents that are actually being abused, actually saying or doing anything about it, period.
Well, when I filed my federal court case, the opposing attorney took me into a boardroom and said, I'm going to tell you how this case is going to go. I'm going to get this case dismissed. And that's pretty much how it's going to go. So I filled out, I got out of there and I filled out an affidavit, which I submitted exactly his word for word, because I couldn't tape it. My phone was in the car charging figures, right? And so I have a dark sense of humor. I totally apologize.
Okay.
But you know, the judge, you know, didn't do anything really about that. I couldn't he denied my motion to disqualify that attorney. Didn't do anything about that. He admitted to not reading my exhibits, and they were not frivolous exhibits. These were transcripts. It was all sorts of other motions, things like that. And he admits to not reading those and ruling them irrelevant. So I filed a motion to have him motion to read exhibits. So then 2 days later in the mail, I get that he read the exhibits and he ruled them irrelevant. So what, you read all those exhibits within a day and a half, you know, a day? No, you didn't. You're just a magistrate. That's all you are. You're not even a judge, even though they are kind of a judge.
Explain what a magistrate is to our listeners.
You know, they're a lesser judge, aren't they? Like a step down, kind of like a used car.
Below a judge.
Yeah, below a judge.
Okay, so like instead of buying a Mercedes, you get stuck with a used Chevy. That's what you're getting when you get a magistrate.
Exactly. Or you're a lawyer and you couldn't get into do well as a lawyer. So this is your moonlighting job.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't be a true lawyer.
Right. With integrity.
And I believe that, you know, in New York State that there's, you know, 20 judges to hear 5,000 cases. You know, I don't think they take the time, you know, they pick winners and losers, and that's that. And they don't look at your exhibits, as been so many times, you know, or the evidence, and, you know, just like, thank you next, I have 15 minutes, thank you next, thank you next, thank you next. They don't ever listen to, you know, any of these exhibits or anything that, you know, significant that you put in front of them. Like, and they don't have to. They're more interested in getting their retirement at, you know, $100,000 a year in retirement than they are actually like doing their job and reading exhibits. Like they don't care. They're too busy.
Yeah, and you try to stay out of the court system. And in my case, we had divorced amicably and we were kind of cool until I remarried. And then all hell broke loose because he had married someone who worked in the courthouse. And so she knew how to judge shop and get the, you know, right attorney. And so it's like, you know, even though you think you're divorcing amicably, I don't know. Should you get it in writing saying that, okay, under no circumstances does a third party interfere in our co-parent relationship because we're still friends, we're co-parenting well, stay out of it. I don't know. Maybe some mothers or fathers don't have the I hate to say, kahunas to shut down their, future spouse and say, hey, this is between him and her, this is between, us, and you've got to just stand back and let me handle the situation.
I think I've seen that drafted in some divorce decrees. I think I've seen that there should be no third party involvement.
Mm-hmm.
I think personally it doesn't matter. There's a lot of parents that just divorce like these just crazy like lunatics. Like in my case, like definitely narcissistic syndrome where the exes like the attention. They're paying a lawyer and they're getting everything that they want, and they're paying these high paid lawyers, and look at them. It's there's so many problems. You could just get your ex could just be just unreasonable, like in my case 5 years of this nonsense, and probably till the kids age out, because he likes it. He likes to be in this court system. He likes to be the winner, because that's all he has left. So again, I think sometimes parents are dealing with just totally just unreasonable parents who use children as pawns to hurt the other person, and uses the court system to hurt that person. My case, and in Catherine's case, like this is dragging on for 4 or 5 years now. We have about the same timeline. Like, give it up. Like they're so worried about their own feelings and their new spouse's feelings, and how can I win, and how can I torture my ex, and I'm going to do it through the court system, and I'm going to do it by using the children as pawns, and not allowing to see the kids, their other parent, because they're crazy, and so they make up these own narratives to tell themselves and tell everybody else. I'm sure this has happened to Catherine and everybody here on this podcast. The ex saying, contacting all your other family members, telling them how crazy you are, even though like it's projection. I mean, it's psychological stuff, 101.
See, you would think that's why anybody tuning in, you would think a judge can say, like, you know what, this person is using the children as pawns, or continuing to what other and it's sociopathic behavior, and that's what it is. It's narcissism, covert narcissism, whatever you want to call it.
Malignant.
It's sociopathic, and it's still a control. It's like having just keep on tying that noose around you. Listen, what else can I do to get back at this woman or this man? Like I said, it's vice versa. It goes both ways, and that's what you got to say it the way it is. So what way than to take your children and use them against you, or alienate them, or use Stockholm syndrome? And yes, judges need to be in a psych eval. Absolutely. It should be like my job and a lot of other people's jobs, or some people that work. We all have to take psychological things every so often. Yes.
And random drug tests.
I get random drug testing all the time. So here's another thing of legal abuse, and I've heard it all the time. So my ex called CPS on bogus allegations, of course, like your unattended child. I had my child unattended in a yard, but I was with him. My child is 6'1" and 15 years old. Okay. So there's the joke right there. Surveillance cameras. I have surveillance cameras everywhere. So I beat that. But long story short is that the false allegations is that I got thrown off. The false allegations, anybody can throw false allegations. So, but the bottom line is that you have to fight them. And you would think a judge, like I said, I get drug tested all the time. So I have babysitters that would, because my ex wouldn't want to watch the children. That's fine, because that gives me more time with my children. When I'm working nonstop, at least I know my children I have nanny cams, everything else. I run a tight ship. So for someone to say, they told my children were like, hey, that smells like daddy's house. My babysitter's like, they were smoking marijuana in front. And this is before marijuana was legalized in New York. So this is 6 years ago. Okay. So I automatically went to the judge. I'm like, listen, I'm demanding a drug test on the spot. I get drug tested all the time. Do you know that he didn't show up? And this is part, and I've heard this from many other parents. The other parent fails to show up. Meanwhile, I get a drug test. This guy is prolonging the drug test for 30 days.
Sure.
So of course you're going to fail. Of course you're going to pass the drug test 30 days later. So it's that manipulation. And the judge is like, oh, we'll give him another chance. How many times do I hear a parent of, oh, you know what? He doesn't have this evidence or didn't go to drug rehab. We'll give him another chance to show up or show up to his drug test. So there's no accountability, period, all across the board. There needs to be psych evals for these magistrate and these judges every so often, because A, either they're too old, or B, they're not playing with the full deck. So yeah, the way the average person has to have drug testing and psych evals, absolutely, and by another party, not by what these court ordered. And you see it, they're bought off. These psych evalu people are bought off. There's a lady in Florida has evidence that her ex-husband paid the psych eval to say that she had not split personalities. That's why
whatever they want to make up that day. Whatever the psych evals want to make up that day. Period. You know,
right?
Like they're you sit with somebody for 15 minutes. Oh, you have 8 personality disorders. Yeah, okay. Like
right.
It's whatever. You get paid 10 grand to sit with a parent for 15 minutes and diagnose them with 15 different whatever. It's a joke. And the fact that they got paid 10 grand to do
exactly.
that. So,
and whose interest and who's paying them? That's the question. It's that vicious circle that they're all in the same pond, in the same sandbox.
It's the money.
So you're not going to rule and say, yeah. It's
all at the expense of the kids. Kids for cash.
Yes. Kids for cash.
That's exactly what it is.
And I feel
a lot of most of these high profile cases, including Catherine's, who spent millions into the system. Millions. I know in my case, it's been hundreds of thousands of dollars. My ex has fed into the system. You can pay for houses and, for every kid,
Can you imagine?
Just so you can win, like that's really, messed up with a lot of different parents in some of these high profile cases in New York.
Yeah.
Catherine's ex spent millions of dollars going after her because, he's probably like, Alan is probably a lot like a lot of our exes and a lot of, victims in the court system, just like off, and gets off on taking their ex-spouse to court and berating them. I mean, that's and as some of it's coming to light for Alan, I mean, that's a testament to your character, and not the abuse, not the victim of this legal abuse, because that's all they have anymore. You walked away from the situation, finally couldn't take any more of the situation, walked away, and this is all that they have left of control over you. So
it's continuation abuse. And the sad thing is, we're all being now, it's a continuation of abuse from our ex-spouse, and now legally through the courts, we're now.
Yeah, and I think that really needs to be the message here, like there's a couple of comments from Alan's side, the ex-husband's side, saying, oh, well, it was a toxic relationship, that needs to be the message. Alan spent millions of dollars going after Catherine and using legal abuse and no transparency. Like, this should be the message, same thing with me and with you. Like, it's nonstop, BS from your ex and these courts and these judges, and like, enough. You're going to drive people to suicide, you know, enough. Like with all this stuff, and I think that should be an important message.
But
And
sad. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not going.
no,
Go
I
ahead.
mean, even driving children to suicide,
Yes.
and the abuser doesn't care because they still got their point
And
across.
that's what I think, that's the determining, that's the mission, the light at the end of the tunnel is hoping that we will take our own lives. And God knows, listen, you know what? I will admit, I'm not, you can't tell, I'm not going to lie and say that I haven't contemplated it. Absolutely. When I have been drugged through in every way, financially, mentally, and now you take my children, and you know I'm a great mother. You had no problem
Yep.
when I had children, and you were always like,
That's
you're an
right.
awesome mom. Isn't that
That's
amazing?
right.
And all of a
That's
sudden
right.
we're not fit mothers, we're abusive mothers, or so yeah,
Crazy.
absolutely. But the bottom line is we cannot let this continue. Whether it's, we are all Catherines, bottom line, whether we are attorneys or not, we have to educate ourselves. There has to be a light at the end of the tunnel that we can just smother family court and these judges, and New York has to change of holding these judges and having accountability, that even if we take it to the Supreme Court or whatever, the Judicial Committee, they're going to not throw it out. And that's the problem. Someone filed 5 complaints to Judicial and Supreme, knocked down for whether it's not verbatim or a certain verbiage, legal verbiage that it wasn't in. Any excuse to give them to knock down your motion or anything, they will. And this has to stop. That's the bottom line. We are not, it's not going to stop unless we are boisterous. We keep on telling Catherine's story. We keep on telling our stories and other mothers and fathers' stories. That's the only way.
And educate our young people on personality disorders. You know, I'll be in line at Walmart or wherever, and if it's, you know, young guy like 18, I'll say, hey, you know, tap them on the shoulder. Do you know what a personality disorder is? Hey, they may look at you like, I don't even know you. But you know what? If you start talking to them and explaining, I don't want this happening to you because this happened to me, but this is what happened. And then, you know, then they're intrigued and they want to know, you know, the red flags. We need to teach them the red flags and when to run.
True. And I think,
go ahead. I think it sometimes gets worse too. Like, you know, in my situation, I think in Catherine's situation, the more money you get, the more power you get, you know, the worse you get. These kind of get worse with it with age. That's what I've seen in my, you know, own divorce, married and together 15 years. And then the more money we got, the more power we got, the more abusive that he got. I don't think, you know, you could tell an 18-year-old, you know, be careful of the signs, but a lot of this abuse doesn't start well into the marriage, and I think that's pretty common,
right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And my advice, in my experience, P.S. I have some fathers and mothers like, why'd you stay in so long? But you know what? If any friend. So listen, I was naive. I thought I could change someone. They had a horrible temper at the beginning when we were dating, destroying apartments, just bashing dashboards in the car, going on Park Avenue at 90 miles an hour. Holy smoke, that should have been a sign. You cannot, that was my toughest lesson as a woman, and any human being should take. You cannot change people. And that is the hardest lesson I will have to live for the rest of my life, people. Whether they're physically abusive, verbally, emotionally, financially abusive, it's never going to change. You cannot change people. And that is my advice to any young person or any woman or man. You cannot change people. Crazy is crazy.
Well,
I definitely don't blame you, and I definitely don't blame a lot of parents in this situation, because a lot of times, like in my case, and I think it's much more common, abuse just gets worse through time. You know, you can, and a lot of narcissists come off as, you know, love bombing, and you're the best, and it's all peaches and roses, and then, you know, then the abuse slowly comes in, you know, and I think that's just like, you know, Catherine's case, and in my own case, like it doesn't start off, you know, or they manipulate you, you know. A lot of abusers like to manipulate you, manipulate your family, you know, the classic stuff, you know, take away from your support system, and you know, slowly ratchet that out, you know, and then, you know, you tolerate it till you tolerate it no more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough. I don't blame parents for staying, and I don't blame parents for leaving. That's for sure. Because if somebody told me, like, oh, if you divorce, you know, this crazy person, you're gonna get your kids taken away from you, and your job, and your home, and your livelihood, and your business, and everything you worked for 15 years, you know, like, you know, I don't know, like, I have a lot of friends in the kind of the same similar situation, and I don't blame them for leaving. I don't blame them for staying. You know, it's a really tough situation to be in.
Mm-hmm.
It is, but to think like, you know what, I've thought about it. Wow, if I would have stayed in my abusive marriage physically, I mean, how much can your children see you getting like an idiot, you know, being pulled like an animal, like a cave woman by a shoulder, by your hair. But maybe I should have stayed because I would have dealt with less abuse for the last 8 years, legally,
Yeah.
financially. Isn't that, that's, you actually think about it, like maybe that physical pain and every other pain, abusive relationship would have been more, less toxic, and I wouldn't have to be drugged legally now, legally through this judicial system.
Mm.
And that, who would have thought that that abusive relationship looks like a party compared to going through family court and Supreme Court? Seriously, that's pretty worked.
Yeah, now, like in my case, you know, my children, and in Catherine's case too, like, that I'm not even allowed to speak to my children. My children are allowed to speak to their mother now. They have, you know, no mother now. So is that worse? Was that better? You know, I don't know.
And for a judge,
tough
any
call.
judge, and this is what judges are okay with. So the mother that
Yep.
gave birth to them, nurtured them, that has no violent history or any history, same thing. I'm not allowed to talk to my 10-year-olds, or a judge isn't forcing. I'm not into reunification camps, but I'm definitely, my children have always been into therapeutic therapy from domestic violence agencies, talking about their feelings. Absolutely. But for a false accusation to be proven, and I got off not once, but twice. So F you to my abuser. I'd be damned if I'll, you know, have these, not fight these false, bogus allegations. And that's the other thing. People, if you have any false allegations ever drafted on you, you fight it to the fullest extent of the law. You write the head. I wrote letters to Albany. I had a court found innocent, absolutely, not once but twice. So you fight these allegations. But for a judge in Long Island, Suffolk, Long Island, to be like, well, your kid doesn't have to talk to you. Really? If my kid doesn't want to go, my 10-year-old doesn't want to go to school, then he doesn't have to. Who drives the bus here? You know, to give authority to a child and to an abuser against a good parent, it's unbelievable. You can't even make this stuff up. And to think your child, what is this doing to our children? Thinking, hey, where's your mommy, or where's your daddy? Oh, you can't talk to them, or they're dead. Seriously, it is going to be beyond detrimental in the future of what our children mentally and physically are going to think it's okay, and what's status quo.
Right. It's
and somebody can correct me. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Catherine not even allowed to see her children, you know, for Mother's Day when she had terminal cancer?
Yeah.
I mean, geez.
Well, you know, I had an idiot judge who fortunately died of pancreatitis. So I wonder what drugs he was on when he was running my case, right? But he wrote an order that there was to be no contact via iPhone, landline, iPad, no holidays or Mother's Day.
It's just graceful.
So this is everywhere. And to
even
do that,
animals.
Yes, to do this.
Even animals.
Right. And to do this to someone with cancer, with a 3rd round of cancer, what kind of animal treats the mother of his children like this?
Yep.
Right.
You know, it should be accountable for this law firm, and, you know, the judges and the attorney for the child and these forensic evaluations. Like, it's got to go just beyond, because, you know, exes are crazy. So there's not a whole lot you can do there. So there has to be some sort of some accountability in New York State for this not to happen again to, you know, we are Catherine.
Yeah. And then that's the thing. I think we all need to put our heads together, and especially New York, and you know, other states have theirs, but right now I think we need to all focus on New York, because there is a huge problem, as we all, from McGinty to everybody. I don't care what county. So we need to all band together, get together, and because this cannot. How many other lives? Who's the next person? You, me. What is it going to take to actually have change and justice, and really put
Going on. It's been going on in New York for a long time. Catherine's not the first, and she's not the last. You know,
blast.
there's
Absolutely.
a lot of suicides that, you know, are just, you know, done more quietly. You know, and Catherine left this place better, you know, than when she was in it, by exposing, you know, and trying to expose some of this, you know, gross judicial abuse and legal abuse by law firms and judges and forensic evaluators, and you know, the system is broken.
And that's what people don't understand, Alisha. That's what the average person that is still in a marriage and still, you know, in that family, they don't understand what they're going to be in the battle of their life, you know, especially here in New York, that there is no justice, that there is bias, there's complete double standard going on. And if you happen to have your husband or wife is a deputy or a police officer or a lawyer or something, there's going to be even more corruption.
And it's spreading. I believe it's getting worse, being in this system for 5 years. I believe it's getting worse, and it's a federal court's not stepping in as well.
No. And they're going to toss it back to like, you know what, it belongs in family court. This isn't federal. That's what goes on. That's what happened to me.
And I believe it's getting worse in the country. I mean, I'm biased to New York State because that's where I'm at and been abused. But it's all over the country because the federal courts are not stepping in. Nobody is doing anything about it. And of course, the, you know, legislator is going to protect the judicial system, you know, like, so it's just, it's a systematic, you know, big problem. And I'm glad at least Catherine's shining the light, you know, from heaven on this problem.
Yeah.
It's a big problem that affects millions of people across the country, you know, with billions of dollars here in New York State that run through this system. It's a big problem.
I'm glad we had this discussion. I'm so glad we talked about this. And I'd like to have you both on again. And, you know, it just, our prayers are with Catherine's family and especially her daughters.
Yeah. I pray that, you know, we've seen and heard that's not even a man that screams like a woman. I can't even use that language, but it starts with a P and ends with a Y. Be a man. And that's the example these poor girls are going to have as a father or a parent. An abusive, verbally abusive and physically abusive person. You know, this is what the courts, and the blood is on their hands, all of their hands. Each one that had anything to do with Catherine, blood is on their hands, and those poor children.
Well, how can people reach you, Tracy, if they have any questions?
I am on TikTok. I am under Falcon. Message me, please. And if I can, I like to put other mothers and fathers in contact with each other in different states. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer. I am learning the law. I did put a jackass through law school. It doesn't make me a lawyer though. But They can talk, you have my number, they can contact you. Absolutely. So if I can and source you to anyone, absolutely, and put you in contact with people in California. I do that often. I do contact, and that's what we're here for. We're to empower each other. You have certain motions that you think that that are available that'll work for another parent. Absolutely. It's all transparency, and it's about unity. So you have my contact number, and I'm also on under Falcon.
Thank you. And Alisha, I know I've had you on.
I'm,
a
a-
couple times.
I'm Alisha Clark on Facebook. That's ALISHACLARK. I have a little bit of a TikTok and Instagram, but I'm most likely active on Facebook. But I am getting ready to do more publications about the corruption of New York State, including a website. So it'll be out. It'll be out real soon.
Excellent.
Yeah. So hopefully I can get some sort of resources as well, so this doesn't happen again
And
in
thank
New
you.
York State.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Alisha and Tracy in the future and other exciting guests. Hashtag every parent's battle every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.